He walked into the boardroom like the future belonged to him alone, without even glancing at my risk report. I had warned about the threat again and again. And when $98 million vanished in a single day, the questions started pouring in. How did no one see this coming? But this isn't a story about corporate politics. It's about what happens when you silence the one person who sees the warning signs, while everyone else keeps speeding straight toward disaster. My name is Salem Pierce. I've spent 14 years building systems designed to keep companies from collapsing from within. Being the Chief Risk Officer at Strive Solutions isn't just a line on a resume. It's responsibility. Every word I say can mean the difference between saving millions or losing everything. At least, that's how it used to be. The day everything changed started like any other. Espresso at 6:15, inbox cleared by 7. By 8:30, I was wrapping up preparations for the most important presentation of the year, ATL Custrix. Just the name made even seasoned executives double-check their work. They were looking for new risk management partners. Their assets exceeded $3 billion, and their tolerance for mistakes was practically zero. I had everything ready: regulatory frameworks, risk assessments, competitive threat analysis, 4 months of work. My team sacrificed evenings, postponed vacations, survived on takeout, and pure determination. We were ready. Then Caleb Dawson showed up. Our new CEO moved like he had never experienced failure. 39, Wharton graduate. And that look, the kind that makes you feel like he knows something about your future that you don't. He'd been with us for exactly 7 weeks, long enough to redecorate an office, not nearly long enough to understand how we actually win clients. Selim, he said, skipping any greeting, about the Atlas presentation. I looked up from my tablet and noticed he had positioned himself to block my way out. A classic dominance move. Everything's on track, I replied. Final run through at 3. That's what I wanted to talk about. He adjusted his designer watch. Who even wears a $50,000 watch to a work meeting? I reviewed the team lineup. The conference room suddenly felt tighter. My staff instantly found very important reasons to stare at their laptops. The team was approved weeks ago, I said calmly. Atlas already knows who's presenting. For the most important project this company has, he cut in, smiling. A wide, confident smile. It would be better if you didn't attend. The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Kevin from compliance nearly choked on his coffee. Rita, my right hand, looked like she'd just been hit. I'm sorry, I asked, even though I'd heard him perfectly. You're excellent at analytics, Salim. Truly impressive. But this requires leadership presence. He paused. I'll handle the presentation myself. Leadership presence. From a man whose assistant had to show him where the parking lot was. I've been working with this client for 9 months, I said. I know every stakeholder, every issue, which is exactly why you'll brief me in detail, he cut in. The decision is final. Send me your materials by 1. We'll nail it. We. As if he'd contributed anything beyond signing expense reports. When he left, the room stayed frozen in silence. 26 people, and not one of them could meet my eyes. Everyone understood what had just happened. A public execution, corporate style. Eliminate the most capable subordinate to establish dominance. Management 101, if you're learning from psychopaths. Kevin finally broke the silence. Selim, this is insane. You built this entire strategy. He can't just push you out like that, Rita added, though her voice trembled. We all knew the truth. He could, and he just did. I closed my tablet, slowly, carefully. It's fine, fine. Kevin's voice jumped an octave. Salim, this is your work, your relationships, I said it's fine. But nothing was fine. As I gathered the materials, as I kept my composure in front of my shaken team, as I walked steadily back to my office, something cold and precise clicked into place in my mind. Caleb Dawson thought he had won. He thought this was about one presentation, one show of power, one moment of dominance. He didn't see the full picture, and he had no idea he'd just set something in motion that he wasn't prepared for. I sat down and opened a document I had completed 4 weeks earlier. Atlas Industries, Comprehensive Risk Analysis. 347 pages covering every imaginable disaster, every legal trap, every financial cliff. And buried deep inside, on page 291, was one specific clause, a detail about key personnel stability requirements, a safeguard I had personally negotiated, never imagining I'd need it to protect the company from its own leadership. I looked at the draft email addressed to Caleb Dawson, copied to legal, operations, and finance. My cursor hovered over the send button. No, not yet. Sometimes the best moves aren't the ones yours. The Atlas Industries Comprehensive Risk Analysis ran 347 pages. I documented everything. Regulatory vulnerabilities across 8 jurisdictions. Potential intellectual property conflicts with manufacturing partners in Southeast Asia. Budget deviations that could spiral into 9-figure disasters. But in Section 843, buried beneath standard legal language, was the clause that mattered. The stability requirement, a condition mandating continuity of key personnel. The risk management partner must ensure that the lead analyst who identified critical vulnerabilities remains actively involved until the final presentation. Failure of the designated specialist to attend the final presentation constitutes a breach of the preliminary agreement. In plain English, if I'm not in that room, you're violating the contract. The morning after Caleb removed me from the project, I sent the document at exactly 9:47 a.m. Subject, Atlas Risk Analysis. Urgent review required. I attached the full document, marked it as urgent, copied every relevant department head, and then I waited. By noon, nothing. Not a single response. Not even an automated reply from Caleb's assistant. I opened the email tracking system we used for client communications. Caleb had opened the email at 9:53. Time spent, 9 seconds. Just enough to see the page count and close it. Legal opened it at 10:08, downloaded the attachment, but never actually opened the file. Operations checked it at 10:32. Time spent, 0 seconds. Around 9:15 p.m., Rita knocked on my door. He's in the main conference room with his trusted circle. Her air quotes were sharper than a blade. They're building a new presentation. Let me guess, I said. Overloaded animations and transitions even a film director would be embarrassed by. She hesitated in the doorway. Salim, you need to challenge this. Go to the board. I'm fine, Rita. She studied me closely. Rita had worked with me for 7 years. She knew my patterns, my tells. You're too calm. What are you planning? I turned to a spreadsheet. Weekly metrics, completely meaningless. I'm doing my job. Caleb wants to lead? Let him lead. She didn't believe me, but she left. Smart woman. Plausible deniability would matter later. Over the next 4 days, I watched Caleb prepare for his big moment. He monopolized the best designers, demanded revolutionary visuals, and spent $23,000, yes, I checked, on a presentation consultant from Boston. He even rehearsed his entrance. Through the glass walls, I watched him perfect his walk, refine his handshake. Not once did he ask about Atlas's leadership team. Not once did he consider their risk appetite, or why they demanded such detailed documentation in the first place. His entire approach revolved around what he called impact, polished visuals promising exponential growth, buzzwords about synergistic transformation, a so-called paradigm-shifting solution, emptiness wrapped in expensive packaging. On Thursday afternoon, Naomi from legal stopped by. Quick question about the Atlas evaluation. My pulse picked up. Of course, Section 843, the stability clause. Is that standard? It's common practice, I said. Without lying, Atlas requires it. They've had issues with contractors swapping teams after signing. They want consistency. She nodded slowly. But it specifically names the lead risk analyst. That's their requirement. I kept my expression neutral. I highlighted it in the executive summary. Page 4. I see. She glanced at her device. And Caleb. Did he discuss this with you? He has my full report. Her expression said everything. She knew he hadn't read it. Everyone knew Caleb worked off summaries and slides, but she wasn't about to challenge the CEO. Not her fight. Thanks, she said. already stepping back. So everything's fine? I'm sure it is. I returned to my spreadsheet. I'm sure it is. Friday arrived with the tension of a title fight. The presentation was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Caleb walked around the office like a peacock in full display, showing off the final version of his deck to anyone willing to look. 112 slides of pure spectacle. Not a single one addressed risk mitigation. That same day, I filed for leave. Tuesday, personal reasons. The system approved it automatically. One-day requests didn't require human review. Caleb would get a notification, buried among dozens of others, if he even looked at them. Kevin caught me by the elevator. "You won't be here on Tuesday?" "Doctor's appointment, scheduled months ago." His face shifted through a series of expressions. He suspected something. Maybe not the details, but enough to know I was planning something. "Selim, have a great weekend, Kevin." As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. The man staring back looked calm, professional, unremarkable. He looked like someone who had already won. Caleb just didn't know it yet. The most effective traps are the ones people walk into, believing they're heading toward victory. And Caleb was practically running. 6 months earlier, I had been sitting across from the chief legal officer of Atlas Industries at their Phoenix headquarters. Eleanor Vance was the kind of professional who reads contracts for fun and can spot a vulnerability from across the room. She respected me because I spoke her language, the language of risk. "We've been burned before," she said, sliding a marked-up contract across the table. "Consulting firms promise their elite teams," she said, "and after the contract is signed, they send in juniors. I understand your concern. I reviewed the amendments, mostly standard. And then I saw the opportunity. What if we strengthen this clause?" I said. "Make it legally airtight?" Her gaze sharpened. "I'm listening. Not just team stability in general, but specifically the lead risk analyst." I picked up a pen. The person who identifies your vulnerabilities must be present at the final presentation. No substitutions. That's unusually specific. You want accountability. This guarantees it. I leaned forward slightly. The person who truly understands your risks will be in that room, or the provider is automatically disqualified. Eleanor smiled. "I like the way you think." We drafted it together, wording it so precisely it could withstand any legal scrutiny. At the time, I was protecting Atlas, ensuring they'd get the expertise they were promised. I never imagined I'd need it to protect myself. And now, Monday morning, sitting in my home office, I reviewed my move one last time. The clause was perfect in its clarity. No ambiguity, no loopholes for management, just cold, inevitable consequences. My phone buzzed. "Rita, Caleb's panicking, says you didn't send him the risk section." "It was all in the report," I replied. "Copied to every department. He wants a summary. There is an executive summary, pages 1 through 6. The typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Is this really happening?" "Yes." I didn't reply. Some conversations are better left undocumented. By Monday evening, my phone was exploding. 19 missed calls, 51 messages. The escalation followed a perfectly predictable pattern. 2:30 p.m. "Hey Selim, quick question about the Atlas materials." 4:15 p.m. "Urgent. Need to discuss the risk section." 5:45 p.m. "This is urgent. Call me immediately." Caleb Dawson. 7:30 p.m. Selim. "I need those risk assessments now." 9:15 p.m. "This is unacceptable. Respond immediately or there will be consequences." I turned off my phone and started making dinner. Pan-seared halibut with roasted vegetables. A glass of chilled Chardonnay. I ate on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the horizon in shades of corporate collapse. Tuesday morning arrived clear and bright. I woke up at 6 o'clock, made coffee, and went out into the garden. My hydrangeas needed attention, such a satisfying task, removing the dead blooms so new ones can grow. At 9:07, I turned my phone back on. Notifications flooded in. Missed calls from unknown numbers. Caleb was probably using other people's phones now. Messages from colleagues, ranging from concerned to outright panicked. 9:15 a.m. Kevin. "We're at the Atlas building." Caleb looks extremely confident. 9:28 a.m. Rita. In the presentation room, Caleb's making his grand entrance. 9:41 a.m. Kevin. Something's wrong. He got interrupted mid-slide. 9:44 a.m. Rita. They're reading some document. Caleb just went pale. 9:46 a.m. Kevin. Security is escorting them out. Selim. What did you do? I set the phone down and went back to pruning. The morning sunlight was magnificent. A neighbor waved to me from his yard. Usual Tuesday chores. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, an empire built on arrogance was crumbling in real time. The full picture would become clear later, but I could imagine it in detail. Caleb walks in with his rehearsed confidence. The Atlas team, led by Eleanor Vance, allows him to begin, waiting for the perfect moment, likely after his grand introduction, to ask a simple question that would destroy everything. Where is your lead risk analyst? Caleb must have smiled, perhaps let out some quip about delegation, right up until they pulled out the contract, that specific clause, that specific requirement. He would have tried to wiggle out, claiming he was fully briefed and possessed all the necessary knowledge. But Eleanor was not one for maneuvers. She is a contract lawyer. Words have weight. Requirements are absolute. Without the presence of Salem Pierce, you are in breach of terms. Meeting over, 7 minutes. That was how long Kevin said the meeting lasted. 7 minutes to burn $98 million in potential revenue. My phone rang. Naomi from the legal department. I answered on the fourth ring. Good morning, Naomi. Salem. Her voice was tense. We need you to come to the office immediately. I have an official day off today. It's about Salem. Please, the Atlas contract. A situation has occurred. What kind of situation? I asked, clipping another withered flower. They claim we breached the terms, something about the stability clause. She paused. The board is demanding answers. We need you here. I'll be in tomorrow, as planned. Salem. I submitted my leave request Friday afternoon. It was approved. I have a doctor's appointment. I examined a particularly beautiful flower. I'm sure Caleb can handle it. After all, he has that leadership grip. The silence stretched so long, it became an answer in itself. Then, until tomorrow, Naomi finally said, first thing in the morning, of course. I ended the call and returned to my hydrangeas. Sometimes the strongest statements are not dramatic confrontations or heated arguments. Sometimes they are as quiet as the click of pruning shears and morning coffee. While somewhere on the other side of town, the consequences were blooming exactly on schedule. The true beauty of the trap was not that Caleb fell into it, but that he had 1,000 opportunities to avoid it, to read the report, to ask questions, to show basic respect for someone else's expertise. But he chose arrogance, and arrogance, as any competent strategist knows, is its own punishment. I only helped it along a little. By 10:30, messages were coming in so fast they were impossible to process. I moved from the garden to the living room, kicked my feet up on an ottoman, and opened some financial model on my laptop. Not that I was studying it, I was just creating the appearance of productivity while Rome burned. At 10:40, Rita called. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering. You have to understand what happened, she said without preamble. I was watching the video feed. Some of us were allowed to watch remotely. Oh? I reached for my coffee. It was still warm. Caleb walked in at 9:14. You know that walk of his, like he owns the building itself. I made a neutral sound. Eleanor Vance let him show exactly 3 slides. 3. The third was about revolutionary synergies, or some similar nonsense. The coffee today was exceptional, Colombian, dark roast. Then she raised her hand politely like a schoolgirl and asked one question. Mr. Dawson, where is Salem Pierce? Interesting, he laughed, Rita continued. Said you handle operational support, and he is the face of executive leadership. She went silent. Salem, I swear. He said operational support, like he was making air quotes. I could imagine it, Caleb's haughty tone cutting through the air in the room like a blunt knife. Eleanor pulled out a folder and began reading the stability clause aloud. Section 843. Caleb tried to interrupt her. She kept reading. The entire room went silent. It must have been awkward. Awkward? Rita's laugh was sharp and bitter. He tried to argue, saying he had been briefed in detail, that his personal involvement showed how seriously we valued their business. She inhaled sharply. Eleanor just looked at him, and then she said, and I quote verbatim, "The contract is unambiguous. Your firm has breached the terms. The meeting is over. My neighbor was trimming his hedge." The usual suburban sounds contrasted perfectly with Rita's account of the corporate catastrophe. And the best part, Rita continued, was the descent in the elevator. Atlas's facility manager was filming on his phone. Not the meeting itself, that would have legal consequences, but the lobby. You can do that there. The video is probably already circulating through their internal channels. What a pity. Salem. Her voice lowered. You knew this would happen. I provided a comprehensive risk analysis. Whether people read it is beyond my control. The stability clause was negotiated with Atlas 6 months ago. It has been in the contract this whole time. I highlighted it on page 4 of the executive summary. Silence. Then, my God, is there anything else? I have a doctor's appointment. Yes, one more consequence. She paused. Atlas sent a formal notice to our board within 40 minutes. They consider this a gross breach of trust. We didn't just lose the contract. They are questioning our competence as an organization. I carefully set down my coffee cup. That is a serious escalation. $98 million, Salem. It's not a missed opportunity. It's a rout. She took a shaky breath. The board has called an emergency meeting for 11 o'clock. Caleb has been locked in his office since they returned. Angela from HR said she heard him throwing things. Throwing things? His awards. Remember those glass sculptures he put everywhere? Turns out they make quite a racket when they hit the wall. The picture was almost perfect. I have to go. Doctor's appointment. Yes, your appointment. Rita paused. You know, you're scary when you're calm. I just took a day off. Sure, and Caleb just happened to run into a circular saw. Another pause. If it means anything, he deserved it. Every bit. See you tomorrow, Rita. I disconnected and checked my email. 163 new messages. I scrolled through them without opening, just reading the subjects. Urgent. Situation with Atlas. Emergency meeting. General meeting. Critical risk assessment question. Where are the Atlas files? Please respond. At the very bottom, time-stamped 11:06, was one email from Eleanor Vance herself. Subject, stability clause. Thank you. I opened it. Salem, I wanted to personally thank you for your foresight 6 months ago. The stability clause you proposed proved invaluable in revealing the true nature of Strive's current leadership. When a CEO doesn't even understand the requirements for his key personnel, it speaks volumes. We will resume our vendor evaluation. If you are available for independent consulting work, please contact me. Sincerely, Eleanor. I reread it twice and then archived it. Proof for the future, perhaps, or just a trophy. By noon, the story had developed further. Kevin was sending updates like a war correspondent. The board has brought in outside counsel. They are auditing the entire presentation preparation process. Caleb claimed you sabotaged him. The board demanded proof. He couldn't provide it. Now he claims you withheld information. The lawyers pulled up your email with the full report. The timestamps confirm everything. He's on the edge, a total breakdown. I made myself a sandwich, roast beef with cheddar, added that special mustard from the deli. I took my time. The beauty of this collapse was not just its scale. $98 million would hurt any firm. It was its completeness. Caleb didn't just lose a contract. He exposed himself as a man who doesn't read critical documents, ignores risk assessments, and blames others for his failures in front of the entire board. With the documents in hand, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number, Salem Pierce speaking. Mr. Pierce, this is Hunter Graves from the Board of Directors. We need you in the office immediately. I am on official leave, Mr. Graves. This is more important than leave. It's about the catastrophe with Atlas. Catastrophe is such a strong word from a board member. Mr. Pierce, this is a formal directive from the board. Should I appear with a lawyer? A pause. No, that will not be necessary, then until tomorrow morning. At 8 o'clock sharp. Of course. He hung up without saying goodbye. Board members hate feeling powerless. I finished my sandwich and returned to the garden. The hydrangeas really did look better after proper care. Sometimes you need to remove the dying parts so the healthy ones can grow. My phone vibrated. A final message from Rita. They just broke the meeting, reading that very clause. Caleb looks like he's about to explode. Everything was exactly as I had imagined, only better because it was actually documented and irreversible. $98 million gone in 7 minutes. Sometimes revenge has a price tag. Wednesday morning arrived with that crystal clarity that makes one believe in justice. I walked into the Strive Solutions office at 8:03, 3 minutes later than my scheduled time. The atmosphere in the office had changed. That specific tension when everyone knows there's blood in the water, but no one wants to acknowledge the presence of predators. Salem. Angela from HR intercepted me at the elevator. They're waiting in the boardroom, the entire board, outside counsel. She lowered her voice. Atlas sent a formal complaint with documentation. I see. Caleb has been here since 5:30. She looked around. He's prepared a presentation on your sabotage. I nearly smiled. Of course he has. When cornered, make a presentation. The boardroom doors opened, revealing a tribunal. 9 board members, 4 lawyers I didn't know, and Caleb sitting at the far end like a defendant who hadn't realized it yet. His usual polish was gone. A wrinkled shirt, stubble, the desperation in the eyes of a man who had fought shadows all night. Thank you for joining us. Graves pointed to a chair. I sat, placed my tablet on the table, and waited. We need to understand what happened yesterday, Graves continued. Atlas has filed a formal complaint citing gross incompetence. They sent copies to our investors. The damage to our reputation, he didn't finish. I understand you have questions, I said. Questions? Caleb exploded. He intentionally sabotaged. Mr. Dawson, the lead outside counsel, a woman with steel gray hair and the eyes of a prosecutor, interrupted him. You will have your chance to speak. Mr. Pierce, please tell us about your involvement with Atlas. I opened the tablet. I led the project with Atlas for 9 months. During that time, I negotiated preliminary agreements, including special requirements that Atlas insisted on. I brought up the contract on the screen. The stability clause was added at their request after they had problems with another vendor. A clause Mr. Dawson didn't know about? The lawyer asked. A clause documented on page 291 of the Comprehensive Risk Analysis, noted in the executive summary on page 4, and highlighted in the email I sent to all department heads on Friday, September 19th at 9:47 a.m. I turned the tablet screen toward them. Here is the email with the timestamp and tracking. I never received, Caleb began. Our tracking program shows that you opened it at 9:53 a.m. I switched to the next screen. You spent 9 seconds on it. Silence. The lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Dawson, did you read the risk analysis? I was preparing the presentation. Salem was supposed to verbally brief me on the critical points. I was excluded from the presentation preparation team, I said simply. Mr. Dawson informed me, and I quote, "It would be better if you weren't present." The board members exchanged glances. But you knew about this clause, Graves said. You knew it would disqualify us. I negotiated it 6 months ago to protect Strive. It ensured our expertise would be valued accordingly. The clause only became an issue when that expertise was ignored. Did you intentionally take leave? Caleb stood up. His face had turned purple. You set me up. I submitted my leave request Friday afternoon for a Tuesday appointment, scheduled months ago. It was approved automatically. You received a notification. The gray-haired lawyer pulled out her tablet. Mr. Dawson, I must ask directly. Did you read any part of the 347-page risk analysis? Caleb's mouth opened and closed. The executive summary. Yes or no? Did you read the risk analysis? It's 347 pages. Yes or no? He sat down. No. Another board member spoke. Mr. Pierce, in their complaint, Atlas mentions other issues, budget discrepancies. I opened another document. Section 5 of the assessment outlines potential budget overruns in their proposed expansion plan. I identified approximately $41 million in unaccounted expenses that Mr. Dawson did not mention in his presentation. The lawyer read from her tablet. According to Atlas, he promised savings of $60 million. Everyone in the room turned to Caleb. That was projective modeling, ambitious goals based on what analysis? I asked quietly. He glared at me. On strategic vision, not on their actual financial performance. You don't understand. I understand that promising $60 million in savings while hiding $41 million in expenses is a $101 million misrepresentation. The word hung in the air. Misrepresentation. The board members shifted uncomfortably. The lawyer continued the questioning. Each answer exposed new failures. Caleb hadn't studied the requirements, hadn't checked the financial projections, didn't even know that Atlas's CFO had changed 4 weeks ago, a detail I had noted in my weekly report. And then came the killing blow. "Mr. Dawson," Graves said, studying a document, "there is a note here about reporting on potential deals. Can you explain these figures?" I watched Caleb's face change as he realized the audit had gone beyond Atlas. "Those are preliminary forecasts. They show $170 million in probable contracts in the fourth quarter." Graves looked up, but the details indicate that most of them are initial negotiations, not probable closings. "Pipeline inflation," I said. Everyone turned to me. It's in Section 11 of the risk analysis, and not just for Atlas. Across the board, our reported pipeline is inflated by approximately 67%. "Did you know about this?" the lawyer asked me. I documented it. In the report from Friday, on page 214, Caleb's face changed from red to white. "Those are aggressive but achievable targets." "It's falsification," Graves said flatly. "And you reported this to investors as probable revenue." The audit continued for 4 more hours. Every thread they pulled led to a new collapse. Inflated numbers, ignored risks. A CEO who managed with presentations and charisma instead of actual work. By noon, Caleb had stopped defending himself. He just sat humiliated, watching his career fall apart on the boardroom table. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce," the lawyer finally said. "We will need all your documentation. Everything is on the shared drive, sorted by date and subject." As I was packing my tablet, a message came from Kevin. "Caleb's office is being cleared. Security is present." I walked to my desk through the quiet office. Everyone knew the king was dead, killed not by a revolution, but by accountability. Rita appeared at my workstation. "The board wants to see you at an emergency general meeting at 3. Why? What do you think?" I looked at my risk analysis files. 9 months of work that Caleb ignored in 9 seconds. $98 million lost because someone confused confidence with competence. "I'll be there," I said. Sometimes revenge doesn't require elaborate schemes. Sometimes you just need to document everything and wait for arrogance to provoke its own audit. Monday morning brought a different light. I stood in the office that used to be Caleb's and now was temporarily mine, and watched the city wake up behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. The glass sculptures were gone, leaving empty spaces on the shelves. His motivational posters were replaced with whiteboards containing actual strategies. My phone vibrated, a message from Eleanor Vance. "Congratulations on the appointment. Atlas would like to schedule a meeting for Thursday." I replied, looking forward to it. Without Caleb's artificial energy, the office felt different, quieter but more focused. People were looking each other in the eye again. Break room conversations lasted longer than 30 seconds. Kevin even laughed at someone's joke during the morning meeting. Rita knocked and entered with coffee and a stack of reports. The results of the pipeline audit. "It's worse than we thought." That's what I expected. How much worse? Caleb inflated forecasts by 81% overall, wrote in completely fictional contracts. 3 clients who gave a flat refusal were listed as probables. Send everything to the board. Full transparency. It will hit the stock price. Lies hit harder. We'll take the hit now and build anew. On the truth. She sat down. The coffee was prepared exactly how I like it. A detail Caleb never bothered to learn about anyone. "Salem, can I ask something?" I nodded. "That first day when he sidelined you from the presentation, you could have fought back, made a scene, gone straight to the board. Why didn't you?" I turned away from the window, considering the words. When someone is determined to dig their own grave, sometimes the wisest thing is just to give them a better shovel. I wouldn't call it wise. "What would you call it?" She thought for a moment. "Surgically precise." After she left, I opened the files from the last week. Correspondences, reports, timestamps, a perfect digital autopsy of corporate arrogance. Everything documented, everything traceable. Not because I had planned some elaborate revenge, but because I had learned long ago. In business, as in war, intelligence is the primary weapon. The truth was simpler than anyone could have imagined. I didn't set out to destroy Caleb Dawson. I simply refused to save him from himself. When you spend 14 years honing your craft, you learn to recognize patterns. The executive who confuses volume with leadership. The strategist who thinks a presentation is the strategy. The CEO who believes his title makes him omniscient. They all make the same mistakes, neglect expertise, ignore warnings, blame others for their failures, and they all fall the same way. Not because someone pushes them, but because they themselves stubbornly run toward the cliff with their eyes closed. I just made sure the cliff was well documented. By Wednesday, the situation had stabilized. The board approved my comprehensive restructuring plan. 4 clients who had wavered under Caleb renewed their contracts. The bleeding had been stopped. The meeting with Atlas on Thursday went better than I had dared to hope. Eleanor Vance came with her entire team. They grilled us for 4 hours about everything, about our processes, about the change in leadership, about our commitment to transparency. One question, Eleanor said as the meeting was drawing to a close. That stability clause? Did you know Caleb would sideline you? I knew he didn't value risk analysis, I answered honestly. The clause was insurance against such blindness, she smiled. Expensive insurance for him. Price is relative, depending on who pays. True. She closed her briefcase. We will resume the vendor evaluation. Strive is invited to participate. Same terms, same opportunity. Don't miss it. When they left, I stood in the empty meeting room where it all began.